Documents be noted. I call the member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm proud to be a member for Indi and to represent the traditional owners and custodians of Indi's valleys, hills, plains. I would like to congratulate the Prime Minister on his powerful speech yesterday and acknowledge his commitment to closing the gap. Mr Speaker, prior to my election, following meetings with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander constituents, I made the following commitment, which I will read to you and ask that it be recorded in Hansard. I respect the traditions and cultures of Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I acknowledge their past mistreatment and commit to involve and consult on the big issues that unite Aboriginal and Torres Strait communities across Indi. I commit to form an advisory group comprised of Aboriginal people from Indi's communities to assist in providing advice to me on issues such as health, education and employment. I commit to make a public statement to recognise and acknowledge past mistreatments to the stolen generations, their families and communities as a result of the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted sorrow on First Australians, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And third, I commit to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which I meet and pay my respect to elders both past and present. When the Commonwealth Mental Health Policy is reviewed in 2014, I will work to include recognition of the unique needs and opportunities for improved service delivery for rural and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Closing the Gap initiative is active in Indi. Our health services have been particularly active in working towards the targets that have been set. Many people are doing fine work, including the Hume Primary Care Partnership, Ovens and King Community Health Service, the North East Health and Women's Health Goulburn North East. Workers tell me the greatest need is for recognition and acceptance. One particular example I will share with you is a sign at the entrance to the hospital in Benalla, a population of around 8,000, 2 hours north of Melbourne on the Hume Highway. And as is highlighted by the Closing the Gap initiative, many barriers exist for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in accessing health care. And the simple act of welcoming, placing a sign at the front door that acknowledges and welcomes Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to the hospital, is an important first step towards improving health outcomes in their community. Another hospital, North East Health in Wangaratta, has also elected a welcoming plaques, commissioned a local Aboriginal artist to create an artwork that now hangs in their emergency department, and held a smoking ceremony in the emergency department. North East Health has appointed an Aboriginal liaison officer whose job it is to make contact with any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander patients presenting to the ED or to other services, and to follow up with them to check if assistance can be provided in accessing further services. Collecting data is essential. There are 82 occasions of services for patients identifying as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders presenting to the hospital's emergency department during the period November 2012 to April 2013. Women's Health Goulburn North East is working towards the target of halving mortality rates for Indigenous children under 5 by providing reproductive health, wellbeing and pregnancy support for young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women living in the Hume region. I'm very proud of the work that hospitals and healthcare providers in my region are doing in making hospitals more accessible to everybody. In Mansfield, the members of the Mansfield District Indigenous Network are doing great work. Today, the network has organised a commemoration of National Apology Day. They will release a community plan to be presented to the Mansfield District Council, which will outline their strategies to achieve their key goals: to have a place to come together, to promote acceptance and recognition, to support Indigenous families and youth, and to have a successful network for our community. Community groups such as Mansfield District Indigenous Network provide the local and community leadership that is essential for achieving the Closing the Gap targets in our communities. There is a great preschool in Wodonga run by the Mungabarina Aboriginal Corporation, which connects local Indigenous families to the education system. They take up to 30 young children in the 3- and 4-year-old level and are able to respond to movements in community as Aboriginal families come and go from Wodonga. They provide transport for the children to and from the preschool and provide morning and afternoon tea. I'm proud to report that they have been assessed recently as exceeding in all areas by the Department of Education. Mungabarina Aboriginal Corporation is also empowering their community and planning for the future of the preschool by encouraging local members of the Indigenous community to train as childcare workers and supporting their learning by providing traineeships for them within the preschool. The Prime Minister rightly highlighted that around the country, communities are struggling to achieve the targets of halving the gap in reading, writing and numeracy. Aboriginal people in my electorate have told me that education is a key priority for them. The reality is that if we close the literacy and numeracy gap, we will have a much better chance at closing other gaps too. Education is a key. Of course, we still have much to do in achieving the closing the gap priorities, but I'm pleased to report that in my electorate the will is there and people are working actively and creatively to close the gap in our communities. In Indi, we have committed to take action to close the gap. Recognition of Torres Strait Islander, of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution is something we must achieve. The Joint Select Committee on Constitutional Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people, chaired by Mr Ken Wyatt, AP MP, has met twice in order to achieve this recognition. I've spoken to the honourable member and have invited him to come to Indi to hold a meeting in the coming months. I want to acknowledge and thank the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Indi for their patience, their tolerance and their commitment to reconciliation. Thank you.